welcome to an episode of Trident Talks. I'm Josh, the director here and founder at Trident, and today, very pleased to say I'm joined by Justin. Justin has 20 years experience in the customer success space and is here to kind of talk all things customer success, including how he built the function at CyberArk. Justin, thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So Justin, would you mind just giving the kind of listeners and viewers a bit of a brief introduction and kind of your background, and then we'll really deep dive into kind of some certain aspects of customer success?
Yeah, sure. So I spent most of my career, about 15 years at CyberArk. I held pretty much every technical role there. I was actually the first IT guy. I was in support, professional services, SE manager. Those are the classic technical roles at the time. And then what I'm most known for was building and growing the global customer success team from scratch. So we'll talk a lot about that, but that's where I spent most of my time at CyberArk. From there, I went to a company called Intezer, which is a code reuse similarities technology. I was the chief growth officer, but I also did obviously the customer success function, biz dev, partners, different roles at a small startup, cyber startup. And then I actually was at Insights as well, which got acquired by Rapid7, CTI space, digital risk protection, TIP, things like that. And mostly in the last 3 to 4 years, I've been consulting with large and small startups in the cyberspace, trying to really emphasize the impact and upside of a customer success function. So hopefully we'll get into talking about some of those cool topics today.
Yeah, epic. Yeah, awesome. Definitely want to dive into at what point do you as a founder bring on customer success and when's too early or too late. Let's deep dive into CyberArk. So kind of bring us all the way back, 2004, 2005, first IT guy.
Yeah.
Talk us through, like, kind of give us the journey and
Yeah, it makes me feel very old when we throw dates on it, but
you're welcome.
But yeah, for sure. Like anything, it was organic. You know, having different roles in different functions, you really just kind of know and do what you know best for customers. So being in those positions, you really get to know the technology very quickly, right? You don't have a safety net when you're in support or professional services. You get to know the product in and out. You get to know the nuances, and obviously you need to be able to help these customers at a technical level. So that's where my journey began. What was very interesting about it was we were able to map those over a course of time, able to map those transactions and those interactions with customers into actual expansion and retention metrics. So at the time, it was very unique. Again, I'm dating myself, but it was perpetual on-premise solutions, right? So we had to be very creative into how we found that information, but being really a trusted advisor was the key to it. So I think learning those tips and techniques really helped me to build up my, let's call it, trusted nature to a customer. And then the next phase of my career at CyberArk was to actually go to the SE team and apply those kind of best practices. What was really interesting about it was I wasn't a very good classic SC. What I mean by that, I was very successful, but what I mean by that was I didn't play the competitive game or, you know, we do this, they don't do that. But pretty much my answer to everything was, well, here's how other customers do it. Here's the best practices. And it really translated well to building that trust with a customer. What I found to be very interesting was, you know, at the time there was no separate CS function. So I was essentially doing obviously the pre-sale and the post-sale expansion, and I hated the pre-sale. It's a very different world where you don't get treated the same as when you're an actual vendor and an established customer. So I really found myself gravitating towards the customer side of the house and being able to help customers and expand customers with obviously a sales mindset because I was an SC at the time. So really all of that kind of history culminates into the business deciding, you know, we want this function to be full-time and we want it to be dedicated. It's a kind of a tricky subject because all of these different terms that we use today for customer success, trusted advisor, voice of the customer, technical champion, you know, those are things that we can all do, like SEs do it, professional services does it. Everyone has that role with the customer. I think the real difference here was the dedication to the function and doing it on a day in and day out basis. You know, for example, an SC has that relationship with customers, especially in a small startup, but when it's the end of a quarter or there's a large deal on the table, they should be closing that deal, right? That's part of their job as well. So having a dedicated opening mechanism to really working with customers was a big part of it. So I found that to be kind of the baseline of how we created the team. And then obviously from there, it's about how do you grow the team? How do you hire? What are the core concepts? But that's pretty much the basics around it. What's really nice is that I think CyberArk really benefited from this function. So year over year and historically, and we didn't call it NRR at the time, but the NRR numbers are about 160%, which I think is quite good. at a global level. So we were really able to walk our customers through a technical journey, being a trusted advisor and helping them, but really not being too salesy, helping them at a adoption level and an expansion level, and knowing that the sales team would help you at the back end.
Nice. So towards the end then of your time at CyberArk, how big was the business or the function that you run? How many people did you hire? What did the CS function? How did you kind of leave it? What did it look like?
Yeah, it was about 50 people when I left globally. That includes directors, individual contributors. Obviously, there's an entire different discussion we could have around global hiring and the cultural differences and how to play that game and who covers what accounts. But generally speaking, I probably hired maybe up to 100 people over that time. Now, obviously, that includes people who were on the SC team and who were graduated to CS or vice versa. One of the things I'm most proud of is that hiring people at the company, I was really looking for what I would call winners or superstars. So I'm a lot of times hiring people with this function that I described, but knowing full well that they might become an SC or they might become a sales rep or they might become a head of support or something like that, right? I didn't really care where they went. That was kind of one of the core values, was just to try to hire and find the most high quality people I could, with a few different additional kind of concepts. I was really keen on that we're the experts. I think this is something that gets lost today. When you're talking to a customer, you're kind of knowing that they know their problems and they're selecting you, the vendor, to solve this problem, but they don't know your technology. They're probably new to the suite, the space, definitely your tech, especially if it's a new logo. If you flip it around and you start to ask yourself and the team, what do we want the customer to do? How do we want them to adopt it? It really changes the dynamic of how you can start to partner with them. So that was like kind of one of the things that we really think about. Again, being technical, it's a whole different thing we're going to talk about, but I think that's a huge part of the process in building credibility. Very, very divisive topic that people don't always agree with, but for sure it's something that is there. And then, those are the core concepts. And then the other thing I was really always very proud of is never saying no. I didn't want to be a small startup where you said, no, that's not my job, or I don't do that. So trying to be a catch-all resource for the customer and really helping to facilitate that positive environment. So those are the things I really felt to be important.
Yeah, we've discussed this before, right? But when you're in that kind of startup world, and I suppose you could say it applies to any kind of environment you go to join, regardless how big or small the company is. If you're the guy or girl, when the customer says, hey, I've got this problem, can you help? And you go, sure, log a ticket and I'll speak to you in 24 hours. If you go, exactly. Yeah, no worries, I'll ping you a Teams link, let's jump on it, let's get it sorted now. Obviously, if it's a bigger problem, then fair enough, right? We'll bring in resources and stuff. But if you're the guy that can go, yeah, no worries, we'll just pick up the phone and go, that is so valuable and that's so trusted, and it's just the right thing to do, right? Because it shows that you give a shit.
Yeah. If I'm a big fan of what's called the Amazon Day One culture. I don't know if you're familiar, but it's a very popular thing. You can Google it. Basically, it's when Amazon was a startup, they had the startup mentality, right? Everyone does everything. We all say yes. We all have a common goal. That's super important when it comes to startup culture. I think as you grow, it's natural when you create these silos of different departments doing different roles and functions. The bigger you get, the more people you need, the more siloed you get. They called it day one versus day two. So if it's something that people listening to this ever want to research, I really believe in it, because if you talk about a big company, you're talking about Amazon. And I think they were obviously very successful, but I think part of it was this cultural mindset of we all do everything, even if we're a huge company, right? That goes till other little things too, like maybe you shouldn't have a meeting over 30 minutes. Maybe you shouldn't have a lot of internal meetings, right? There's a lot of like cultural things that go into it, but I really picked up on a lot of that stuff as well.
Yeah, nice. When sort of casting back to especially the CyberArk days, the majority of people that you hired into the CS function, taking away the kind of very senior positions, were they customer success professionals before? Is there like a...
No. Yeah, it's a great question. They really typically weren't. And I think this goes to kind of that hiring mindset of, first of all, at the time, there wasn't a function of customer success. So there really wasn't a pool of people that had a background doing it. However, I think even if fast forward till today, where there is a large pool of people doing these things, I think it is, I feel like what customer success represents, and we'll talk about more about the kind of the idea behind it, is it's really a combination of being, in my example, technical, but also having the people and soft skills where you can communicate with the customer and you can advocate for them internally, the project management, and you can really understand their challenges at kind of a basic level, but also be able to quickly fix things or jump in technically. So I think it really, all the people that we hired were typically not CS people. It's funny, like the first group of people that we were recommended to start to look at were SEs, and SEs actually were not a good fit. I think because typically an SE is at a point in their career where they're much higher paid at a higher salary. They have a very specific expectation of what they want to do day in, day out. So we were looking for more junior technical resources. And honestly, a lot of times it was the customer champion or customer resources because they were in security operations or they're in the support team of their customer themselves, and moving over to the vendor side is something that they ended up doing. So I know it's a trend today that's probably pretty popular, but then it was more delicate because you didn't want to poach your customers, but at the same time, you're really providing them an opportunity to do what they did, but at a larger scale with more impact.
Yeah, you're right. I can cast my kind of head to a sales engineer, really experienced at the top of their game, quite set in their day-to-day routine. Yeah. I know what I'm doing. I know what a demo is. I know the product inside out. But customer success is way more agile, right? You got to pivot here, there. You got to do this to change your So that kind of segues nicely into the kind of sales engineers have a great technical mindset. So you think, okay, cool, that'd be great for customer success because you can understand the product inside and out. If I'm from customer support, and I'm like, hey, I really want to support customers post-sale in a vendor. How technical do I have to be? So how important is that? And if that is important, how do I know the product and learn it? So how did you onboard a customer success manager that maybe wasn't so technical?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that I used to say that you want to be technical enough to be credible. And I think that's the real premise of where cyber is today. Obviously, there's a huge philosophical discussion around technical versus non-technical, but at the end of the day, you don't have to be able to open up the code and look at the bits and bytes and be so technical that you're overreaching, because there are teams that do that. Product management's obviously support, layers 1, 2, 3. Obviously, SEs get into some deep dive stuff. But at the end of the day, you want to be credible enough and knowledgeable enough in the product that you can get quick wins and fixes. And that's really where the trust gets built up, in my opinion, is helping a customer when they actually need it. I always cringe at I think we started to touch on it, where it's like, I get on a call with a customer, they have a quick question. Oh, you know what? I don't know the answer. I got to get somebody in the call. I'm wasting their time. There's so many CS people that are reaching out to this customer, trying to get that valuable time. If I can't solve that in the moment, it's really a wasted opportunity, I think. So being credible enough to know the product in and out, but also know your limitations to, you know what, that's probably a deployment question, or that's probably a support question, or let's get an SE on the call because we want to deep dive into that topic. I think it's very much a screening process. And I think that it sounds trivial, but knowing the product enough to be able to help the customer with basics will actually offload all those things from those other teams and help I always really think that the customer success team, we'll talk about this in the future, but can be an efficiency multiplier of other teams if you do it right. But to answer your question, I think you want to be technical enough to be able to be credible to the customer. And that's really highly dependent on what the technology is. If you're in the CTI technology, you got to be pretty technical to understand that space. Maybe less so if it's something basic like a firewall, right? So it really depends on what the technology is, but I think you want to be credible enough to answer questions on the spot and really be a quick and helpful resource that shows value. And I think that's the real premise here, is you don't want to be able to, I don't want to put down other ways that other vendors use customer success, but if I can't immediately tell why this is valuable to a customer, maybe I shouldn't be doing it, right? So if it's like, they helped me with a support case, or they helped me understand a best practice, that's huge value, I think.
Okay, yeah, nice. Yeah, I like that. So if I joined your team, how would you upskill me? Like, do you put me in front of the product team? Do you let me shadow demos with sales engineers? Or is it just, hey, go read all of this material and tutorials? And how does that happen?
Yeah, well, the first thing that we didn't even talk about it, but one of the hiring practices that I very much believe in is what's called a technical test. So part of the skill group that regardless of the person's technical background, I want to really try to understand in the interview process, what is their ability to learn quickly and to put effort and time into something. And those are really hard things to measure. So we actually had a very hard technical test that we would give even if it was a non-technical resource. And we gave them something that we knew they couldn't accomplish. It was like some impossible task of this hugely complicated deployment with, let's be honest, bad documentation. And we said, good luck. And I didn't really care what they did or how much they did it. What I cared about was how much effort they put in and what their learning process was like. I tried this, then I did this. I tried this, then I did this. And I think those are the rudimentary skills that you want to build up a technical background, to answer your question. So I would actually take that, ideally that person that I found, and put them in more of a support environment, because you're learning things on the fly in very high circumstances, right? Outages, different project deadlines, different goals. Like when you're talking to a customer in the support level, you're not in a great position to be open and friendly. It's, I need this now and I need it done now. So shadowing those teams and getting involved, and maybe taking on some support cases. We definitely put people in the support team for a short period of time. I do think there's a ton of value from going from the support side of things to, let's say, professional services, but more so the SE team as well, because they're answering the biggest gap I found between support folks and SEs is they answer the same question, but they answer it differently. One is, here's the blunt answer. I'm not sure what the outcome will be. It's just the answer you need right now, versus, okay, I need to phrase this in a way that helps you understand it. You can grow. Obviously, there's some competitive traps in there on the SE side. So there's a lot of massaging the same message that you can learn from shadowing SEs, and obviously how to avoid questions, how to emphasize things that you do well and maybe things that you don't do well. So there's a lot of nuance to it. So I always found those two teams to be the most beneficial in getting the CS person up to speed when it comes to how to talk to a customer about your product.
Nice. Okay, cool. So you mentioned recently you've been doing a bit more advisory work and trying to help founders, probably some VCs, I'm sure, as well, in their portfolios, building CS functions, how, when, why, etc. The main question here is, I'm a founder, just got seed funding, 3 million. I've got a great idea, great product. I'm going to change the world. If I come to you, when do I need customer success?
I think customer success has, obviously you can make a case anytime, but I think it has its best value when the company has a product vision, potentially multiple products or multiple stages of their product that they want the customer to adopt, and they need someone to help them walk the customer through the journey day in and day out. And I think that's really a critical difference, because if I'm a small seed customer and I have 2 salespeople and 1 SE and 3 customers, the sales team can do that, right? That's the sales team. The sales team has the cycles to do that. For sure, they're going to go out and acquire new customers, and I know there's a huge cost and time of doing that, but that's part of their growth journey, right? Is to get more logos, for sure. I think that once the sales team is mature enough, where, I guess the best way to say it is, when the sales team's focus from the executive team or from the board is to go acquire as many logos as possible, you're now cannibalizing the time that you would spend with the customer to walk them through that journey. You can't do both. It's very hard to do so and unless you're flooding the market with salespeople and they have 3 accounts, and nobody wants that either. So what I found is, when a sales team is shifting to logo acquisition, but they want to maintain their customer base, I think that's the perfect time to introduce it, because you're doing a few things along the journey. One is you're learning about your own product, right? You're actually, a funny story about CyberArk is that at the time, of course, we didn't call it CS, but the entire privileged account management space was adopted and created from customer feedback. So CyberArk used to be a document, quick side stories. CyberArk used to be a document vault. People would store documents in it, all great stuff, great technology, great security. And we found that large banks, specifically a handful of them, they had little Word documents or text documents with lists of passwords in them. And I'm in support, right? So I'm like, what is this? Now they're happy, they're using the product, they're renewing. There's no red flags here, but when you start to really understand, what are you trying to do here? They're like, well, because of all these SOX compliance and PCI compliance, I have to rotate all these passwords and I have no place to store them. So I use your document vault for that, because it's the solution I had and I didn't want to pay for another one. And you start to learn and say, you know what, that makes perfect sense. And we actually took those feedbacks from a customer. Again, they're not unhappy. These are really another advantage of where a startup might want to use CS, is to learn about what is the actual adoption motion from the customer base and how can we create a better go-to-market strategy, taking that feedback and going to product management and going to the developers and saying, can we make something that does these things, really kicked off the entire space of privileged account management. So that's something I'm really proud about, but it's a really good story too. But to answer your original question, I think that when your sales team is unable to properly grow a customer, and your customer, potentially your customer journey, I want them to do A, B, C, D. Maybe that's coming from a vision, or maybe it's coming from an existing customer you're trying to replicate. then you need someone to do that day in and day out. And regardless of the time of the quarter or the deals on the table, you need a dedicated resource to be able to kind of walk them through the journey and continue to do so with every customer.
Love it. I love it. I love that bit about, I'll just kind of call it innovation. So you're looking at utilizing your CS function to listen to the customer and go, we don't have that feature. Can we put it into the product roadmap? Can we develop it? And then we become stickier and just add more value because it's the right thing to do. And then we can also sell that product somewhere else. So therefore,
it's funny. Like, I think companies are so good at firefighting. Like the innovation that you hear the stories about are customer X is really unhappy. Customer X has a huge gap that they're telling you they need because they've already identified that this is a gap. Those are for sure have value, and those will innovate technologies across the board. But what about everything that's not a super high priority? Something that you can identify proactively. I think that's a missed opportunity for a lot of startups because they don't have the bandwidth to do it with the existing sales team. It's not a break fix because there's one support person covering the globe. You know, small startups have to think nimbly, and I think you can start to introduce functions that can really help facilitate some of these things. And like I said, offload them. Now, maybe your customer success person is triaging some first level support cases so your support team's not so overwhelmed, right? Or maybe if a customer is interested in a new function or functionality or technology that you offer, maybe you don't need the SE to jump on with a demo that may or may not go anywhere, right? Because it's not tied to revenue yet. So there's a lot of innovation and efficiencies that can happen, but I think that for sure, introducing CS at that critical growth stage is great. And one more thing I'll say is I think a lot of startups realize that too late because they get past, so they acquire, and all of a sudden they start to see churn. And by the time you see churn, you're probably 6 months too late at a minimum. So you have to be ahead of that curve for sure.
Yeah, good advice. Does that count if I'm a customer success manager? Does that count towards my upselling? If I'm innovating and I'm going, hey, a customer said they need a new product. A new product gets released 9 months later, and it goes to that customer. Is that class as my upselling?
Well, it's quite a loaded question. No, it's a huge debate, and I think that I really believe that not only should personal opinion, I believe that I've had a lot of success hiring technical customer success managers, and also tying them to revenue and tying them to expansion. And I know that's a super high level topic that a lot of people don't want to get into. But I really, and by the way, if we go back to our analogy here of a seed startup, probably not a good fit to do that, because what you're really going to do is potentially cannibalize some of the sales that the sales team is needing to make because there's such a small subset of customers. But fast forward to the stage where customers are now growing, you're adopting them. You want to, I really think that tying customer success to revenue, and by the way, expansion revenue, of course, retention revenue too, NRR is important because a few things. One, there's a huge burnout rate of customer success. I don't know if there are statistics around it or not, but you know, it's a very thankless job. You're helping customers, but let's be honest, we all want to be on the stage at a sales kickoff. We all want to be recognized for a large deal. Like, those are very positive things in a person's personal career development. So tying them to revenue and tying them to deal cycles is just a great way to make them feel like they're connected to the mission. And obviously they make additional money as well. So that's a positive thing. I do think it avoids burnout. And I think the most important point here is that if your goal is only to retain the customers or to keep the ARR the same, a reward churn, I think that it's a missed opportunity because it's impossible to have zero churn and you're not really shooting for a larger goal. So in my opinion, so if you go back to the philosophy of a lot of the concepts of customer success, it's okay, we want a high net promoter score. We want a high customer satisfaction score. Those are great things to measure. But we can have a very healthy debate on how tied are those to actual retention, because I don't know, I've done 10 to 15 surveys in the last few years. 5 done. I don't have time for this, right? Is that a reflection of how happy I am? It's not at all. And that's not the case for everyone. I just think that those are tools that they're good indicators, but I think the best indicator if a customer is going to retain or not is if they're going to upsell or they're considering upselling. It's a race condition on the way to selling. Even if you don't get the sale, they're happy enough to, oh, you know what, I don't have the budget this year, but for sure I'm going to retain the product. The best metric to me of retention is actually expansion, because if you are even considering or going to expand, then for sure you're going to retain them. You can't do one without the other. You can't. you can't expand and not retain the product.
Yeah, I agree, and I do agree with you that expansion and retention is equally important in terms of how you reward your CSMs or your CS function. I know it's quite a bitter subject and sensitive for some people. I also think that if you are trying to expand in that account and it's not from a salesy point of view, then you're trying to make them better.
Yes.
So if I'm trying to make your environment better by trying to give you a few more products and tools, then compared to retention, which is I'm just trying to keep you. So instead, if I expand into your environment, I know, and also I'm a solutions expert, I can understand it and go, hey, if you had that one tool, yes, it'll cost you 10K extra a year, but it'll do this. I'm making your environment better, more secure, et cetera, as opposed to, are you happy with what you currently got? Okay, cool. You're going to renew next year. They're like, yeah, of course. And I haven't got time to fill out your survey. 5555, you're great. It'd be interesting to see if anyone's got any data that's listening with regards to surveys and NPS scores versus actual retention and signing on the dotted line. I'm not sure many would actually disclose that kind of information. But that'd be interesting.
They're not bad exercises to do. I think that you can get value out of it, but I take it with a grain of salt because I've been in those shoes. And I just think that, again, we're in a world where time is a premium to everyone. And if I don't have a lot of time, like, think about it, every customer probably has 50 CSMs that they work with. I mean, that's how can you spend quality time and get real insight of 50 products? That's a whole different discussion. But I think there is one caveat here. So a lot of companies are probably listening to this and thinking, oh, that all sounds great, but how do you pull it off? How do you structure it? And I really like to use the analogy of an ISR and a sales team, right? So the idea is an ISR gets paid on deals. We don't ever debate that. It's part of the process. But their real function is opening the door. They're creating an opportunity that the sales team can then mature and close. And I think the CS team can have a similar role with existing customers. Not necessarily with the sales title, I agree, you want to be more of a trusted advisor, but more so to vet and qualify what are the opportunities, what's the timing, who are the players involved, so I can pass that off to the sales team. The underlying story here is probably you're going to end up paying the sales team and the CS for the same deal. So there's a double pay metric that some companies don't want to go with. But again, these are, what do they call them? Classy problems. I just got a big expansion and I have to pay 2 people. I know it's not ideal, but I got the expansion, right? Versus the opposite, which is I lost the customer. I didn't get the expansion. I'm not focused. So I do believe that no sales team would debate whether they need an opener and a closer. I think that it's really a newer concept to have an opener and a closer with an existing customer. I think it's always just like, no, that's my customer, I do everything, and I'm not sure that's the best way to do it.
Just expanding on that point you made, it just made me think of something. How do you know when a customer success manager that's just joined is doing well? Do you set KPIs? I'm thinking, I'm a founder, I've only got a certain run rate, 18 months, 24 months after post-funding, right? And I've just had a CSM that's quite expensive, according to what I think is expensive, because I'm like, hey, I'm not seeing a return. It's like building the channel, right? And that's a separate conversation in terms of ROI immediately. But what do you set, or how do you know, like maybe there's 1 or 2 KPIs that you go, good CS. Like, how do you know what that looks like?
Yeah, I think I'm personally not a huge, I understand the value of KPIs. I'm not a huge fan of it because I feel like it's checking boxes without creating a larger goal. But regardless of how you measure it, I think that I would say that a customer success person is successful by, you can simply measure tangible things like ARR dollars. I think we live in a world where if you are a startup and you're going for funds, you need to have an ARR justification for every employee or some sort of metric that you use. That's just with the world we live in now. And I think when you get out of, yes, the customer's happy and we need this function and we're paying all this money for this person, that's a really hard thing for an investor or the board to say, yeah, do we really need it though? But if it's tied to an ARR number, I think that's a lot more tangible. So I always would tie to that metric. I think that that's extremely important to have something that's a high level goal. Now, obviously, you could be doing your job, opening doors, and maybe the deals don't close. That's a different problem. But I think those are the key metrics there. From a KPI perspective, I think that it has to do with, if I had to create a KPI, it would be around the customer journey. So I wouldn't do check in every 6 months, check in every 2 months. Those are cookie cutter answers that don't really reflect that I know my customer, because sometimes it's really busy. If I have a retail customer and it's middle of November, they're not doing anything. They're in lockdown, shutdown mode because they have Christmas coming up, right? So they're in no way, shape, or form expanding anything they're doing at that moment. So the metric might say, yeah, you got to get on a call with them. We're just wasting each other's time at that point. So long story short, I would say the KPIs should be around the adoption cycle or the lifetime journey of the customer. We want the customer to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in order. Doesn't have to be exactly that, but we want them to be growing and expanding. So it would be metrics around adoption metrics, maybe more of their customers or more of their employees using the technology, more integrations, more things like that we know will lead to where we want the product to be long term. Those are KPIs I think are valuable, and really it fits into the model of I'm your trusted advisor. I want to help you do things more efficiently. I want you to get more out of this product, not I want you to be happy and get on a call and check a box. So
yeah, no, fair enough. Okay, cool. Justin, what's the future of customer success?
Yeah, it's tough. I think that it's quite an interesting time for customer success. There's a lot of great professionals out there. I think that customer success is trending, especially in the cyberspace, is trending more towards a technical role or profile. I mean, today, if you think about it, there are companies that have customer success managers and they have customer success engineers, CSEs.
Yeah.
Not sure I can justify having both, but that's a different discussion. And I think the point here is that the customer success manager's job is to set up a call with the CSE. Why not just have the CSE do it, right? Like if we're thinking efficiency and minimizing headcount, I think it's trending in that direction. I kind of hinted at it too. I think customer success can be an efficiency multiplier for other teams. So if I am technical enough to offload basic demos from the SC team, or triage support cases from the support team, or even help the marketing team with their customer, their technical marketing. There are roles. I think that there's a consolidation happening, and customer success can be kind of a catch-all internally to a lot of different teams. I think there's a lot of value to that, and it really helps the customer to have one throat to choke, that they know you're the person to help them out, but you're also the go-to person to help bring in other resources at critical stages. So I think that that's kind of the future of CS, is to go more in a technical direction. And also I think it's to tie it more to revenue. I think that we all can agree that the SE team is a very established environment today. You get high quality professionals, you pay them, but it's worth it. And we're all okay with that. I think CS is trending in the same direction. I could see a model where there's more of an OTE compensation plan for a CS person versus what I see today is, hey, we just want to keep our customers happy and retain them. And if you get an upsell, that's great. And maybe you get a bonus out of it. Like, what incentive does that customer success person have to actually helping the customer expand and even for the company to get sales? It's kind of a nice to have, and I can see it being much more of a core criteria. Again, it's not about the sale, but the sale is an outcome that leads to all good things in the middle. So I could see it being more tied to revenue, higher paying more for CS, especially for technical CS, and more consolidation. That's kind of where I would see it going.
Love it. Justin, appreciate the education, walking us through your journey at CyberArk. Obviously very successful there. I think you're right. I totally agree in terms of the amount of requirements we're seeing come in that is a CSE or a CSM. And then you're like, what's the difference?
Well, put yourself in the customer's shoes. The customer is saying, why do I have two people? And they're going to gravitate towards the CSE, but they can't get the CS every time. So now they're frustrated. It's a whole different discussion we can have.
Yeah, and they want the shortest path to a solution, right?
Of course.
Yeah. It's about how do you get the CSE who's personable enough to provide a solution and have a conversation and not need a conduit, which is the CSM, right? And then they're just called CSMs. But yeah, I agree. Look, appreciate your time. It's been really good to, I suppose, walk through the whole CS journey. And like I said, hopefully if there's a few founders watching, they kind of gone, that's when I'll actually need to kind of have a chat with Justin and reach out to you on LinkedIn. I know you've got a few articles that are really good and just kind of explains a lot of nuances or the value added by the CS function. So really, really helpful. So I'll definitely tell people to come check it out. Connect with you on LinkedIn. And like I said, appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was great.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Bye.